Welcome back to The Critique. Today we are looking at a script analyzing influencer Gabbie Hanna's pivot to religious content, her controversial behavior toward other creators, and her frankly bizarre claims regarding science and theology. Let's just jump right into the feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into it. The script identifies a powerful cultural phenomenon with the canceled to Christian pipeline, but currently it treats it as a subpoint rather than the structural backbone of the piece.
Right. That is the biggest opportunity here. The author defines this pipeline so effectively. I mean, they use that Russell Brand comparison and this whole concept of Jesus forgives me so I don't need to apologize to actual humans.
Which is a remarkably strong sociological argument.
It is, but the weakness is that this strong argument just gets completely diluted by the scattered reactions to specific TikToks. The listener really risks losing the why this matters among the look what she did now.
Yeah, I mean, you get these pages of reactions to the JoJo Siwa callouts or the beef with Brooke Monk and
it just feels like drama channel gossip.
Exactly. If I'm watching this, I'm thinking, okay, she's being mean on the internet again, so what? You risk the audience clicking off before they even realize this is actually a video about systemic evasion of accountability.
So the suggestion here is to fundamentally restructure the narrative, to use that pipeline as the primary lens through which every other action is viewed. Put it at the absolute beginning, rather than just treating it as one item on a list of complaints.
From page 4 or 5 all the way up to the intro.
Right. Frame it as the central thesis. Something like, this isn't just Gabbie acting weird. This is a calculated blueprint for evading accountability.
And to give a concrete example of how this changes a text, you wouldn't just list the JoJo Siwa or the Brooke Monk callouts as random acts of meanness anymore.
No, you'd frame them specifically as symptoms of that Christian shield the author talks about.
Yeah. The script actually mentions Gabbie framing her struggle as mental health to Christian, while the author argues it is actually problematic to Christian.
Yes. So use the specific examples, like the fake apology where she completely refuses to name Jesse Smiles. Use that to rigidly prove the evasion of accountability step of the pipeline.
It turns those clips from just, content into actual evidence. It gives the piece so much more weight.
It elevates it from a reaction video to a proper cultural critique. You aren't just laughing at an influencer, you are diagnosing a trend.
But, speaking of diagnosing, that actually bleeds into my next issue. The script oscillates between two contradictory interpretations of the subject's behavior without reconciling them, creating narrative confusion.
Oh, you mean the tension between the calculated grift versus genuine mental instability?
Exactly. The weakness is that the author expresses so much frustration at not knowing if Gabbie's doing this on purpose.
Right, the whole digital footprint versus psychosis debate.
Yeah. At times, the script really mocks her for knowing exactly what gets attention, right? Implying she is this mastermind manipulator. But then at other times, it expresses genuine concern or confusion about the whole dinosaurs or dragons thing.
Which makes the tone just violently wobble between anger and pity. And because the author doesn't know which lane to pick, the listener doesn't know how they're supposed to feel either.
But isn't that ambiguity just the reality? Nobody actually knows what's going on in her head.
Sure, but the suggestion here is to acknowledge the ambiguity of the subject's intent up front and then use it as a rhetorical device, rather than a source of frustration.
Okay, so how do we do that in practice?
Well, instead of trying to solve the mystery of her intent, you focus entirely on the result, the impact.
Give me a concrete example, like the dinosaurs and angels stuff.
Okay, right now, the section analyzing the dinosaurs were dragons and aliens are angels claim is basically just a reaction of shock. The author is like, woman was too stunned to speak.
Right.
We need to transform this into an analysis of result. You argue that whether Gabbie actually believes in the dragons or if she's just saying it for engagement, like with that murdered teenager controversy the script mentions, the impact is exactly the same.
I see. It's the weaponization of absurdity to shield against valid criticism.
Exactly. If we are all down in the comments debating whether she's unwell or calculating, we aren't talking about the actual people she hurt.
That is such a smart pivot. It completely sidesteps the ethical trap of trying to medically diagnose a stranger on the internet.
Right, and you can apply that same lens to the selfie attack. She judges that girl's selfie and claims the girl has mental health issues.
Which the script currently frames as just blatant hypocrisy.
It is hypocrisy, But if you reframe it to focus on impact, it's a strategic use of her own history to deflect criticism. She floods the zone with mental health buzzwords, making the "is it real or fake?" question entirely irrelevant to the damage she's causing.
The confusion is the point.
Exactly. Not knowing is part of why this pipeline is so incredibly effective. It's the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card.
That really tightens the argument. But, keeping things tight brings us to another section. The segment reacting to the dinosaurs and aliens theories suffers from pacing issues and personal anecdotes that distract from the critique of the subject's ego.
You're talking about the teenage Satanist story?
Yeah, the weakness here is that the reaction to those clips just evolves into this really long, personal anecdote about the author's childhood belief in Satanism.
And that confusing analogy about worms in the dirt.
Right. The "we are just worms who don't know the gardener exists" thing. It just completely halts the momentum of the critique.
It really does. I mean, the author is clearly trying to relate to Gabbie's weird beliefs by sharing their own, but the anecdote just runs so long. By the time we get back to Gabbie, I've completely forgotten what point we were even trying to make.
It feels like we accidentally stepped into a completely different script about the author's adolescence.
So the suggestion is pretty straightforward. You have to kill your darlings, trim the personal reaction anecdotes and that worm analogy entirely, unless they directly serve the argument about the subject's arrogance.
So as a concrete example, instead of getting bogged down in the scientific inaccuracy of the dinosaurs or dragons claim, like instead of just laughing at how biologically wrong it is, you pivot immediately to the arrogance of making that claim.
Yes. It's not about biology, it's about ego. It's this secret knowledge. All the scientists are wrong, and I, Gabbie Hanna, know the truth.
And you can connect that "I know the truth about dinosaurs that science doesn't" directly to that poem later in the script, where she literally says, "I am God's prophet."
Exactly. You use the dinosaur claim as evidence of spiritual pride, which is a term the author actually mentions later, rather than just framing it as her being weird.
That is so much stronger. It ties the bizarre claim right back to the central theme of the Christian pivot, being about ego rather than actual humility.
Which perfectly sets up the final piece of the puzzle. The script successfully identifies the hypocrisy in the subject preaching humility while practicing judgment, but the evidence is too scattered to land a knockout punch.
Yeah, this drove me crazy. The weakness is just the physical layout of the arguments. The author brings up that Dear Atheist video where Gabbie is preaching humility, saying we can't know everything.
And then pages later, after an ad read and the whole pipeline discussion, we finally see her judging that woman's selfie, saying, "What in the mental health is wrong with you?"
They're just separated by way too much real estate. By the time the listener hears the second clip, they've completely forgotten the exact phrasing of the first one.
The contrast is totally lost in the noise. So the suggestion is to create a dedicated say versus do section that places her words on humility directly next to her actions of judgment.
Literally just physically cut and paste those text blocks so they are right next to each other in the script.
Yes, a verbal montage. Think about the audio experience. You play the clip where she says, "In Christianity, we call that humility. We can't possibly know everything."
And then hard cut to the clip where she claims to know Jesus' path for other influencers.
Exactly. Just back to back. Give the audience whiplash.
Another concrete example of this would be taking that line from the poem, the "I am not a Christian, I am a saint, I am God's prophet" line.
Yes, highlight that specific line.
And contrast it immediately with her earlier statement about everyone being spiritual babies.
It creates an absolutely undeniable picture of the God complex the author is hinting at. You don't even have to write extra commentary. The audio editing does the heavy lifting.
It really just lets the clips fight each other.
Chronology is the enemy of argument in video. Don't organize by date, organize by theme.
So just to recap, the battle plan for the author: first, center that canceled to Christian pipeline as the main thesis at the top of the video, rather than a subpoint buried in the middle.
Second, resolve that tension between the grift and the mental illness by focusing entirely on the impact of the behavior, rather than trying to diagnose the intent. Assert that the ambiguity itself is the weapon.
Third, tighten up those reaction segments. Cut the worms and the Satanist anecdote so you can use the dragons and aliens clips to prove her spiritual ego, rather than just providing comedic relief.
And finally, build that dedicated say versus do montage. Bring the evidence of her preaching humility and her practicing judgment together so the hypocrisy is impossible to miss.
The raw materials in this draft are really fantastic. The research is deep, the clip selection is great. It just needs to be organized like a lawyer presenting a case.
Absolutely. To the writer, you have incredibly strong instincts. We would love to invite you to apply these structural edits and resubmit the work so we can take a look at a final polish on the tone.
I cannot wait to see how that God's prophet montage turns out.
It's going to be so good. That's all the time we have for this critique. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.